This is going well. Everybody's gone, so.
We still have 5.
Yeah, so we'll keep moving. Yes, we're all listening. Yes, thank you. 1250 is a new policy that outlines the designation of the ADA and Section 504 coordinator. That's a new policy. Policy 4033 is actually a revision of a previous board policy, 4.34, which was last updated in 1992. This reflects changes and updates on 4033. Several policies are just sort of cleanups because of the code of conduct that you've already approved. So one of those is 5008. 5008 was updated and already approved in the code, but now we're matching the policy, as well as 5101, which was also updated in the code. 5103 is also a cleanup to match the code. 5404 is a new policy. 5404 is a new policy that was taken from practice and then updated with some wording. 5406, also something that we've already discussed and reviewed as part of the code. This will just match the code. 5418 is an updated policy to the homeless students. It was previously homeless students, now McKinney-Vento. You have 2 versions of it. One should have a big X through it to show that that's not the one we're using, but the one on the agenda is correct. 5424 is an old policy. Again, we're going back and looking at our old policies and making sure they're reflected in the new policies with some updates to elementary school uniforms. 8120 is an update and a carryover to a cleanup to remove some of the wording on OSERs. 8150 is an update to the committee structure. 8150 essentially removes that communications committee and then shows our seriousness about our board governance and creates a board governance committee as well. And it outlines in that policy the board governance committee. And thanks to Erin Duffy, she's already tweeted this one out. 8346 outlines that recommended change to 3 minutes of public comment and then asks for that form prior to the meeting instead of during the meeting. So those are 2 big changes that are will be brought forth at the next board meeting as first reading. And in that time, if you review those policies, if you have some questions or some suggestions or you catch something that needs to be changed, please don't hesitate to let me know. First reading then will begin at the earliest convenience on those policies.
Are there any major board or questions over the policy information item this evening? Mr. Perlman.
I just want to address policy 8150. Part of 8150 says, and I quote, "The president shall appoint such temporary and special committees as may be deemed necessary or advisable by the board." My personal understanding of that is that that language means that the president shall appoint such temporary and special committees as may be deemed necessary or advisable by the board. What I have been advised by legal staff here is that, and it was mentioned earlier, that the board president can unilaterally create a board. And that's the decision, and nothing more really needs to be said about that. But I would encourage, we heard about, we went over the communication policy or communication audit tonight, and I would just encourage us, we had a board retreat talking about communication with each other, and this communication audit spoke at length about our communication, speaking as one voice to the public, and we all know the importance of that. And so I would just ask that every board member here take a look at policy 8150 and just think about whether or not we want to encourage full participation in the board in the decision-making in the creation of a committee. Now, that's not to second-guess what committee was just formed, I think this whole board would agree that there should be a superintendent search committee. But the more we talk with each other, the better. That's one of the best things about a public school system, is a public board that works publicly, transparently, to make decisions. And we all know that not everything can be or should be discussed publicly. There's personnel matters and things like that. But yeah, when we're talking about transparency, when this committee was formed, and I'm on the committee, I still have questions about the roles of it and things like that. And that's all going to be fleshed out when we first meet on Wednesday. But I guess this is just a long way of requesting that the entire board take a look at policy 8150 and see if we think it might be a good idea to get everyone's input in the creation of committees.
So normally I would not address that because it's technically not germane to the changes that are being presented for policy 8150, but I do because we discussed it at our policy committee meeting. It was brought up whether or not we wanted to make changes to the policy, and the policy committee did not elect to make changes to it. There is a section in policy 8150 that says temporary, special, or ad hoc committee. And the first sentence of that policy is additional temporary, special, or ad hoc committees of the board may be established only by board action or by the president. That sentence says the board can direct the president to form a temporary, special, or ad hoc committee, or the president can form a temporary, special, or ad hoc committee. And that is something that has been done from time to time on the board. The Student Assignment Plan Committee is a really good example of that, where it was formed by the president to look at the student assignment plan. The second sentence says the president shall appoint such temporary and special committees as may be deemed necessary or advisable by the board. Then goes on to say this, they may authorize the superintendent to appoint other members to that committee as well. And in discussing with our legal counsel and consulting, someone referenced consulting with English teachers, an English degree, that sentence to all of us read that if the board has deemed a committee necessary, the president has to appoint members to it. The president can't just say, well, the board said create this committee, I'm not going to do anything with it. The board president is required by policy to appoint those temporary members to that temporary committee. I kind of take it a little bit personally that you're saying it wasn't done transparently, because we sent an email out to everyone on the board saying, hey, we're going to form the special committee. Let us know if you're interested. Technically, we did not have to do that by policy. Technically, we did not have to discuss it as an officer team, but we did. And we did define roles for that committee as far as their first task is bring us a recommendation. Are we going out for a new search firm, or are we going with one of the two search firms? That wasn't given just to the committee. That was given to the full board. We also laid out clear expectations of, this committee is going to take minutes and they're going to be sent out to all board members, so everyone is on the same page and knows what's going on exactly with the committee. We are trying to be as transparent as possible with this. And in fact, you and I had discussed creating the committee multiple times before I sent the email out saying I'm creating this committee. So I'm sorry I'm a little frustrated, but I think as a board, we elect leadership every year. And we expect that leadership to lead. And if the leadership feels it is appropriate to create a temporary committee, they should be able to create a temporary committee. And that's something we've seen. Human Growth and Development had a temporary committee. Student Assignment Plan had a temporary committee. It makes sense for us to have a superintendent search temporary committee. I think Mrs. Godding had her hand up.
Well, I was just going to reflect on the fact that we do elect board officers, and we do expect them to put in an extra amount of time over the amount of time that the rest of us put in. And so when they have been in contact with folks and heard from individuals, and clearly we know this is a committee that needs to be formed, then somebody needs to take action. Somebody's got to own it. And in any organization, there has to be leadership that does that. Clearly, if board leadership was creating all kinds of committees and we were all being drafted to be on those and we didn't have time, we would say, well, is that really necessary, and isn't that the superintendent's job? In this particular case, if a committee needs to be formed for something that the board is responsible for, I think that it's appropriate to do that. And so I guess I don't have an issue with the wording, because there will always be times, unfortunately, where you have to create some committee that serves for X period of time to get you through something, and we don't always know what that is. It could be catastrophic, or it could just be a board responsibility issue. So I guess I didn't have a problem with the wording, and I just wanted to clarify that and say that's why we elect board leadership, to do that extra amount of work and put in those extra hours and all that extra time to help us facilitate our lives and our roles on the board well.
Mr. Perlman?
Well, again, it's not the matter of this particular committee being formed, but, in the future, this board, this isn't just for our board, but we may, in the future, have a school board that doesn't communicate as well as our board. And so we may want a policy in place. We may want to encourage better communication. I think that's what we've been talking about over the last 6 months. And so that's all I was trying to do. I wasn't trying to take away anyone's ability to do anything. But should we have a board at some point in the future that has a communication problem, then encouraging communication is just something that I think is good.
Mr. Snow?
And I hear you 100% on that, Mr. Perlman. One of the things with the Board Governance Committee is whoever's on that committee, that is going to be working on not just the functions of board ethics, but also how we communicate as a board individually. How do we communicate with each other? And I think that is something that give us the next 6 months over this fall of that committee actually getting their feet and their standing, and I think we'll really starting to address the communication issues that we've had as a board to strengthen our communication, because we are going into a superintendent search, and I do hear you. We need to have very good communication, clear and concise, that everybody's getting the same information. So, thank you.
Okay, that is an information item, so as Mr. Ray said, it will come back as an action item for first reading at our next board meeting. If you can please take some time, read through the changes. If you do have any questions or concerns, please send them to Mr. Ray as soon as you can. We do not have anything on receipt of reports, so I will look to Mr. Snow.
I apologize. We moved the meeting around and I packed up early. I move that the Board of Education go into closed session for the protection of the public interest, for the prevention of needless injury to the reputation of individuals, to discuss with the superintendent, secretary to the board, Melissa Comine, Dr. Turnquist, Connie Kanoki, and legal counsel, personnel negotiations, pending litigation, real estate, and legal advice.
Is there a second? Oh, and Mark Warnicki.
And Mark Warnicki.
Now is there a second? Second. All right, we have a motion by Mr. Snow and a second by Ms. Ryan to go into closed session. Roll call, please, Mr. Ray.
Sorry. America?
Aye.
Perlman?
Aye.
Ryan?
Aye.
Scanlon?
Aye.
Snow?
Aye.
Williams?
Aye.
Cassidy?
Aye.
Goding?
Aye.
Holman?
Aye.
9-9.
Motion carries. Let me remind the board that the purpose for closed session is for the protection of the public interest and for the prevention of needless injury to the reputation of individual. To discuss with the superintendent, secretary to the board, Melissa Comine, Dr. Turnquist, Connie Kanoki, Mark Warnicki, and legal counsel, personnel negotiations, pending litigation, real estate, and legal advice. Let the record reflect that the board went into closed session at 9:48 p.m.